The Jets lose to the Seahawks. It's a defeat that feels different, yet familiar. Let's break it down today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Monday, December 2nd, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday, and today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Well, surprise, surprise, it's a Monday, and we have a New York Jets loss to break down. The Jets fell yesterday to the Seattle Seahawks, 26-21 at MetLife Stadium. The Jets' record drops to 3-9. In this loss, the Jets clinched their ninth consecutive losing season. The ninth loss guarantees that the best the Jets can do is 8-9, which is a sub-500 record. What happened in this game? It's interesting because every Jets loss has a different feel to it. Yet you see a lot of the same themes play themselves out over and over. And that was very true in this game because this was the sort of game where through much of the first half, it felt like the Jets were in total control. And through this season, the Jets have been a chronically slow starting team. In fact, heading into this game in my preview shows on Friday, I mentioned that the 3 weeks heading into the bye, it felt like the Jets were spent the first half of the game kind of deciding whether they were going to go all in. Because they came out very flat. They came out very sloppy in all of those games. This game was completely different. In fact, about halfway through the second quarter, you just had the feel this was not going to be Seattle's day because the Jets were controlling the game. And most of it was because of dynamic special teams play by the Jets. A kickoff return for a touchdown. 2 fumble recoveries on kickoff returns by Seattle. Jets were up 21-7 in total control of the game. Nothing was going Seattle's way. And then there was a 2-play stretch that completely changed it. Aaron Rodgers missing a wide-open Garrett Wilson in the end zone when the Jets were inside the 10-yard line. And then on the next play, Rodgers throwing a bad pick six to Leonard Williams. Now, give Leonard Williams credit. That's a heck of a play for a defensive tackle to make. But Rodgers got fooled. He was not expecting Leonard Williams to drop. He did not see him and threw an ill-advised pass. And that completely turned the game around. The Jets did not score again after that point, and the Seahawks took control. And the Seahawks eventually went on to win the game. Special teams play has not been good for this season for the Jets. So to see them ride that wave yesterday, I think no Jets fan thought the win was in the bag at 21-7 because we've watched this team all season long pull defeat from the jaws of victory. But it felt like for the first time all year, somebody else was kind of self-destructing. The Jets were playing great special teams, but the Seahawks were also playing awful special teams. It felt like their kickoff return guy couldn't catch the ball. He dropped 2 on an unforced error. There were essentially 2 balls he just dropped where the Jets had nothing to do with it. Now, the first fumble was a great play. It was a great strip on a tackle. But this game, it was like for the first time all year, maybe the Jets were having a day. Every NFL team, even bad teams, have a day where things finally go right for them. And it felt like it was that kind of day for the Jets. But then we saw the same old issues pop up with this team. And while they got an A-plus performance from their special teams, even though the Jets did have their first extra point block, this was an A-plus performance for special teams. The Jets were in total control. The Jets were up 2 scores, about to go up 3 scores. And the point I made on last night's show when I recapped it is even if the Jets throw an incompletion there, even if the Jets settle for a field goal, they're up 17 because they're going to kick a field goal. They're going to go up 24-7. That's how much of a killer that interception was because it took the game from being 3 scores down to 1 score. And the Seahawks were right back in it. And from that point, we saw the same stuff that's been plaguing the Jets all season long. And it began with the Rodgers interception. And I think even like the most diehard Rodgers fan right now has to be able to see that he is the number one problem on this offense and on this football team because he's just performing at a really low level. Sometimes you watch an offense struggle and it's not all about the quarterback. But sometimes you watch an offense struggle and it's mostly about the quarterback. And we've seen this the last couple of years with the Jets. In 2022, most of the offensive struggles were about Zach Wilson not performing. In 2023, they were not all about Zach Wilson. It was a system-wide breakdown. Talk about the offensive line. You talk about the receivers. Now, Zach Wilson didn't play well. He was part of the problem in 2023, but he wasn't the whole problem. This year, you look at it. Now, Carter Warren had a bad game yesterday, but the offensive line has actually been pretty solid. I know Tyron Smith's not having a great season, but the offensive line's been solid for the most part. The Jets have guys who can play at receiver. Garrett Wilson's an excellent receiver. Devontae Adams, he's not the first team All-Pro he used to be with Green Bay. He's still a productive receiver. In fact, I was saying yesterday, if I'm Buffalo, I'm probably like furious at the Jets for overpaying for Devontae Adams, because if you add Devontae Adams to Buffalo right now, the way he's playing, the Bills would be the prohibitive favorite in the AFC right now, and they were a team that was very interested in trading for him. But the quarterback, and I don't even know you can blame it on injuries anymore, because even though Rodgers doesn't move great, even though he didn't move great in that game, he was at least able to like kind of slide within the pocket. He was able to extend a couple plays with his legs. He wasn't vintage Rodgers scrambling, the Green Bay version, but he seemed healthier than he's been in some time. And he still like could not hit the big pass. And I was actually at the game. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. It just seems like his arm is deteriorating in front of our eyes, because I remember at the start of the season we thought, the arm's not bad. The arm's still close to what it was in Green Bay, but as the season's gone on, it just feels like the arm is losing some juice to it. I mean, I watched some of those deep balls in person yesterday, and they were really struggling to get to their targets. Rodgers is a problem on offense, but the defense. What else can you say about this defense? This was yet another instance where they allowed this is the third time since the calendar turned to October where the defense allows 2 scores in the fourth quarter to lose the game. The Seahawks put up 10 in the fourth quarter. And the frustrating part is that we saw stretches where the defense played really well. The start of the game, the Jets were kind of shutting down the run. The Jets were holding the Seahawks off the board. And then in the in the second half, they had an epic goal line stand where the Seahawks ran 8 straight plays from inside the 5-yard line because of penalties, some of which were merited, some of which weren't. And the Jets stopped them. Jets had a goal line stand. And then the defense kind of lets up in the end of the game. But, another thing I talked about last night on the recap show was the concept of complementary football. What happened after that goal line stand is just a sequence that I think in many ways defines the Jets season, where the Jets start rolling. The Jets offense makes a couple productive plays. It feels like, okay, this offense has been stalled the entire second half. Maybe they'll get rolling. Maybe this is the drive that puts the game away. Maybe we'll finally get a victory. And on a big run, Breece Hall fumbles the ball away, his second fumble of the game. And from that point, the defense couldn't stop anything. The defense allows 10 straight points to lose the game. The Jets are not, and they never were, one player away from going to the Super Bowl. I think that's something that's been proven beyond all reasonable doubt this year. And as much as the Jets, as we got into the season, as much as Woody Johnson, the owner, wanted to believe that this team was one move away, all we needed to do was fire Robert Saleh. All we needed to do was trade for Devontae Adams. Okay, surely signing Hassan Reddick will fix it. There are fundamental issues with this team. There are fundamental issues with the way this team was built. They were never one player away. They were never one move away. They were never even an Aaron Rodgers trade away. And you see that on a week-to-week basis, because the Jets find new ways to lose. Yet you never feel like they're super, super snake bitten, because it's the offense. It's the defense. This team can't come from behind. They can't play with a lead. They can't play smart football. They're awful situationally. The coaching is just horrendous. There's nothing good about this football team. Even on a day where the special teams virtually spots them 21 points. First of all, they only take 14 of those points. And the offense, throws away an opportunity to put the game away early. And the defense can't close the game out in the fourth quarter. It's everything. That's how you get to 3-9. And the Jets, it was a different feel yesterday. The Jets took a different path to losing, but the issues that have been issues all season long continue to be issues. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to turn our attention to you and how you cope with a season like this, because this is just an incredibly disappointing Jets season. Well, I'm going to tell you about my day yesterday, and the day I had yesterday kind of reminds me of why I'm a fan and why I do this. And I wanted to share it with you to, I don't know, maybe make you think about why you root for the Jets and how you can find some joy in a lost season. And we'll talk about that continuing here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. Hey, Locked On Jets fans. I know you're like me and your holiday shopping list is, let's say, far from complete. All right, let's be honest. I haven't even started shopping for the holiday. There's a good chance you haven't either. Well, if that's the case, I've got the perfect gift for the passionate sports fans in your life. Maybe you've heard of IceShaker. IceShaker is now officially licensed with the National Football League, the National Hockey League, the National Basketball Association, the NCAA, and Major League Baseball, and will make the ideal gift. Created by and used by the Gronkowski brothers, IceShakers has sold over 1 million bottles. They have changed the game with workout bottles, and this is the gift you've been looking for. They have kitchen-grade stainless steel bottles that won't absorb water like the plastic bottles do. There's a patented twist and agitator that breaks up powders, but is silent when you shake it instead of the annoying ball. It's third-party tested. It'll hold ice for 30 plus hours. It's customizable. Send your logo or check out the custom shop to customize your favorite bottle. Turnaround time on custom bottles is 3 to 5 business days. The agitator works as a strainer as well and makes very solid tailgating cup to mix drinks. They have changed the game with workout bottles, and this is the gift you're looking for. Go to IceShaker.com and use code LOCKEDONNFL. It's one word with no space, LOCKEDONNFL at checkout to save 25% off your order. Again, IceShaker.com, code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout to save 25% off your order. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What makes you happy and cozy at home during the month of September? How do you stay cozy during these winter months? For some, wrapping up in a blanket with a mug of hot chocolate or watching a movie with family is the best way to spend the month of December. Therapy is a great way to bring yourself some comfort that never goes away, even when the season changes. Therapy has many benefits. It's helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It's not just for those who've experienced major trauma. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. Big shout out to you every day. This is the daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. The Jets were defeated on Sunday by the Seattle Seahawks. The final score was 26-21 at MetLife Stadium. A very frustrating loss in a frustrating season. If you're a Jets fan, you have every right to be frustrated. In fact, you should be frustrated because this team has underperformed in a very, very profound way. I think it's clear that this team overhyped itself. This is not a team that really had Super Bowl talent, but it's also not a team that has 3-9 talent. This is a team that should be like around the 500 mark, hovering, on the fringes of the AFC playoff race. And it's just a frustrating season in every way. And through much of the season, I'll tell you, and I don't like talking about myself that much on this podcast. I try and avoid it because the focus is really on the Jets. But I wanted to share a story with you because through much of the season, I've been frustrated. And I think like many of you, I've asked myself, why do I keep rooting for this team? Well, as you may know, if you're a longtime listener, my dad's a huge Jets fan. And I've had my dad on the show a couple of times in the past. And he goes back to the days when the Jets played at Chase Stadium. He was a season ticket holder back then, but he gave them up long ago. I think he may have given them up when the team moved to the Meadowlands. His life was changing. He was getting married, having kids like me. So it was just busier on Sundays. So a couple of weeks ago, he goes, I'd really like to go to a game this year. I know they stink, but I think it would be a fun experience. So we started looking, and a couple of days ago, I found pretty cheap tickets that were pretty good for this game against Seattle. So we bundled up, we got into the car yesterday and we went out to the stadium. And, despite the defeat, it was a lot of fun. It was a cold day at the stadium. Fortunately, we got tickets that were kind of like in the sun for most of the game. The sun eventually like set over the stadium and we lost the sun. But through the first half, we were in the sun, which kept us warm on a cold day at MetLife Stadium. And it wasn't a very well played game, obviously. If you saw that, you know that. But it was an entertaining game to be at because there were a lot of wild plays, a lot of turnovers. All the special teams plays the Jets made, and there was this guy sitting next to us who was pretty hilarious. This was a guy who had consumed a number of beverages, I think, before getting into the stadium, and continued to consume them as he was watching the game. And during the game, he's yelling out, "You're the worst coached team in the league," which I think was a pretty insightful point. The Jets are a pretty poorly coached team. He also yelled out that I can predict the plays every time, every single first down. You're going to run the ball with Breece Hall between the tackles. Again, pretty insightful point. Guy was actually pretty spot on with a lot of his analysis. During the phantom Devontae Adams pass interference call, which look, I saw the replays at the stadium. I haven't watched the game, so I didn't see all the Fox replays. It looked like a really shaky call. It looked like he was jostling with the corner. It looked like the type of play where a flag should not have been thrown to me. But he's yelling out, the reason this happens is nobody respects our coaches. again, like, not a bad point. I do think that there's something to the idea that there are certain teams that get calls. He said, he yelled at, if that was Kansas City, there'd be 3 penalties. I really do think there's something to the star system in the NFL. I think you saw it early in the season. I think you still see it now. Some roughing the passer penalties Aaron Rodgers gets that maybe Zach Wilson wouldn't get. But then he went on and he said, the reason we don't get these calls is that they know our coach won't walk on the field and punch the officials. I go, I don't know that I agree with that. He goes, every other team's got a coach that will do that. I'm thinking, I watch a lot of NFL. I don't think I've ever seen that happen. And then when the Jets failed on 4th down late in the 4th quarter, he yells, we should have kicked the field goal. We were down. The Jets were down by 5 at this point in the last minute of the game. A field goal cuts the lead to 2. So the point I'm making is that this guy was pretty entertaining. We laughed, and even though the Jets lost, and even though it was a very disappointing game, my father and I had a really good time at the stadium. We talked through the game. We kind of laughed at the Jets' misery. We celebrated when the Jets made good plays. That touchdown to Devontae Adams in the first quarter, the kickoff run back, the Isaiah Davis touchdown. Lots of good moments. And, it was a day where I really enjoyed bonding with my dad. And he said he had a good time afterwards. And, it was very cold. And, of course, the MetLife Stadium experience is not the greatest experience in the world because, the parking situation's a mess. It's tough to get into the stadium. It took us like 40 minutes to get into the stadium after we parked, between the walking, between the lines at the gate. If you go to games, I think you know what I'm talking about. But overall, it was a good day. And a day like that kind of reminds you why you root for the Jets, where it's you want to see the team win. You follow this team all season long. You want to see good things. You want to see the team come out victorious. But sometimes there are bigger things to it than that. And I think sometimes we need a reminder of that in a lost season. And look, everybody's got their own way of dealing with it. One of the things I've always said is, some people say you should boycott the team to send a message. And if that's what you feel is necessary, you should do that. But if you enjoy going to games, there's something to be said for that. You get to go bond with a parent or a child. It's enjoyable. And, not everybody lives close to the stadium, so not everybody's going to go to a game. Not everybody's lucky to still have their parents around. So, it's not an option for everybody. I'm not saying like you do everything exactly the way I do it, but it's just more find your own way to get some enjoyment out of this team, because there ultimately is a reason you started rooting for the Jets. And I don't think the first reason any of us started rooting for a team was that we just wanted to root for a team that wins the Super Bowl, because that's not the reason anybody starts following football. People start following football because it's a really fun game to follow. And, you spend time bonding with your fellow fans. I mean, I've made a lot of friends through this podcast and through my website. There's a greater experience to it. There's a greater good to following the NFL. And, if that's going to games with family and, bonding over that, then that's great. If it's watching the Jets, from your house and having, a big party with your family, that's great. If it's, reconnecting with an old friend by taking in a game, that's great. Or if it's, taking a step back from the team, maybe you're just so frustrated by the way this team's played. Maybe you're so frustrated by the way this team is run. You just need a break. You just need to step back. And that's okay too. I've spent much of this season questioning, like I'm sure many of you have, like, why do I even root for this team? Why do I even care? Can't I find better ways to spend my Sunday? And there probably are better ways to spend my Sunday. But the day I had yesterday just kind of reminded me that you can find joy even in a lost season. So I can't tell you what your way to do that is, but there is a way you can make something out of a lost season. Build a Sunday around it. Spend time with friends, spend time with family. If you want to go to a game, go to a game. If you want to be a little bit warmer, stay home and enjoy the game that way. That's great too. But even in a dismal season as this, you can find ways to have fun. And again, maybe it's just stepping back. Maybe you just decided there are better ways to spend my Sunday, and I understand that too. But I wanted to share my experience because this season, you could probably tell, this season's really weighed on me. The season's been really frustrated, and in yesterday's loss, I found ways to have maybe the most fun I've had watching a Jets game all season. And I hope you can find your own way to do that. Now, I had you on the Locked On Jets podcast. Let's talk about some bright spots on the team, because there actually were some positives that I think came from this game. And we're obviously to the point where the Jets are out of the playoffs. You're really focusing on future contributors, how they performed, are they developing? I think we've got some good things to say on that front, and I'll tell you what they are as we continue here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you place your first $5 bet. Jets are underdogs heading to Miami this week. That's no surprise. I think the Jets will probably be underdogs the rest of the season, except maybe the Jacksonville game. I mean, look, I don't know how you could think this team's going to win a game going forward, but if you do, FanDuel's the place to get in on the action because you get started with $150 in bonus bets if you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is also brought to you by Game Time. We just talked about if you want to go to a Jets game, there are plenty of cheap seats available. You can find a great seat. Game Time is the best place to go to get in on the action because Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I actually used Game Time myself this weekend. Met my sister's boyfriend for the first time. We went into New York. We caught a Broadway show, so I pulled out the Game Time app and got a great seat for a reasonable price. And everything was done in 30 seconds. They also have all-in pricing. So, like sometimes like you buy a ticket and there are hidden fees. Well, Game Time's all-in pricing. It shows you exactly what you're going to pay before you buy. Really convenient. I highly recommend Game Time. I don't just tell you about it. I'm a customer. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL, one word with no space, for $20 off. Download the Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. This is the Locked On Jets podcast on this Monday. The Jets lost to the Seattle Seahawks 26-21 yesterday to drop the record to 3-9 on the 2024 season. What a disappointment. And now that we're in December, it's a Jets season. They must be out of the playoff race. We must be looking at how young players are performing, potential building blocks for the future. And despite the loss, I actually have some good things to say on that front. I think this was clearly Olu Fashanu's best game as a pro. And the Jets, it's been tough because he's bounced around as a rookie. He had to play right tackle, which is a position he's not familiar with. He had to play guard for a little bit. And then after the injury to Tyron Smith, Olu Fashanu stepped into the starting lineup at left tackle. And I think the hope for the Jets is that Olu Fashanu stays there for the next 8 to 10 years. I don't think we should ever see Tyron Smith play left tackle again for the Jets. It really would serve no purpose. In fact, it hurts the team because the more he plays, the more he hits playing time incentives, which depletes the Jets cap space going forward. These reps, even if he doesn't play well, I think these reps are valuable for Olu Fashanu. Well, yesterday I thought he had an excellent game. He did not allow a single pressure through the full 4 quarters. And look, I think if you've been listening to the show, if you've been watching, this season's been a struggle for Olu Fashanu. It's something you should expect. It's not a shock because rookie tackles struggle in this league. Outside of Joe Alt, a guy who's like plug and play guy, most rookie tackles are going to go in and have growing pains. And that's true of Olu Fashanu. I think just physically, there's some work to be done. He's got to hit the weight room. He's got to build up that strength a little bit. And really my hopes for him have been to show flashes. It's not going to be consistent. Look, I'd love for Olu Fashanu to go out and play stellar football the final 5 weeks of the season. I would imagine there's going to be some growing pains, and that's simply because there are growing pains for almost every young tackle. There are going to be games where he doesn't look that great. The question is, do you have moments where you say, okay, that's the makings of a good player. That's a guy who, when he puts it together, he's going to be really good. And I know, like, in this fan base, there's been a lot of talk about Brock Bowers over the last couple of weeks because Brock Bowers is having a phenomenal rookie season. Brock Bowers is reaching the promise that a lot of people thought he had heading into the season should the Jets have drafted Brock Bowers. Well, look, the Raiders are not exactly a good team even with Brock Bowers. And the Jets tried to find a building block on their offensive line. If Olu Fashanu stabilizes the left tackle position, a critical position going forward, this team is going to be in very good shape. And look, again, I think there are going to be some bumps along the way for Olu Fashanu. I think that there are going to be some rough games. But this is exactly what I wanted. I wanted at least one game where I look back on to give me hope. Where I could look, during the offseason, I could say, you know what, there's something there. He showed real talent in that game. And when he puts the pieces together, that's going to be a consistent occurrence. I was delighted by the way Olu Fashanu played. And I think that has major implications for the Jets going forward because this is a guy they're going to be counting on to lock down a critical position. I thought, really, really encouraging performance by Olu. Will McDonald. And maybe Will McDonald heard the fans a little bit, because if you go back to the 2023 draft, the guy who people kept talking about going to the Jets was Jackson Smith-Njigba. And of course, he ended up going to the Seattle Seahawks. He's had a big couple of weeks where Will McDonald the last month had been pretty quiet. Will McDonald delivering 2 sacks in the second half of that game. 2 really important sacks. And if the Jets had won, Will McDonald would be one of the heroes of this game. Now, look, is Will McDonald a spectacular player at the defensive end position? Well, he has a double-digit sack season, but I think if you've been watching the Jets this year, he hasn't really performed at the level of a double-digit sack guy. He's also a guy who struggles setting the edge in the run game. He's not a complete player. He's a guy who's maybe not as good as his 10 sacks total, but he's a guy who could play in this league. I think it's clear to me that Will McDonald's part of the solution with this team. I think you get to this point in the season where the Jets are out of the playoff race, the player's either part of the problem or he's part of the solution. I think Will McDonald's part of the solution. I think this has been a really encouraging second season for him. I think he's displayed some good pass rushing moves. I think that the outside speed rush where he gets a bend, and you mix that with the move where he sets up, where he starts going outside, then makes the spin move to the inside. I mean, that's the type of thing you can live off. When you have pass rush moves that complement each other, that's the type of thing that can help you thrive. And Will McDonald looks like he's going to be a good player for the Jets at the defensive end position for quite a while. I think that if you're looking back at that 2023 draft, it was a pick that raised eyebrows at the time, and understandably so. But as I always say around drafts not always about pure immediate needs. It's about finding great players, especially at the money positions. Defensive end's a money position, and the Jets got a great performance out of Will McDonald. And Will McDonald he looks like he may never be a star level player, but he looks like a guy who's going to be a quality pass rusher for a long time for this team. And then, you want to talk about the special teams. Look, I don't know whether this guy is going to be a great player going forward for the Jets or whether this is just a one-game wonder. But Kenny Wangu, a kickoff return for a touchdown and a strip on a kickoff return that results in a fumble. The Jets recover and end up scoring a touchdown off. Have the Jets found a new special teams ace? I certainly hope so. I'm very passionate about special teams play. I think special teams play is vastly understated. I think people underrated its importance. And I love special. Look, Irv Charles is one of my favorite players because he's so good as a gunner on the kickoff team. Well, Kenny Wangu, he might be my new favorite player. He may have that title as my new favorite player because of how he performed. I'll be watching him going forward. Fortunately, the Jets took Xavier Gipson a little bit away from Gipson was still the primary return guy, but at least he kind of lost some returns yesterday. Maybe we're starting to move away from Xavier Gipson a little bit. And then another guy who got involved was Isaiah Davis, who didn't touch the ball that much, but made an impact when he did. He had a touchdown catch on a shovel pass from Aaron Rodgers in the first half. And then he actually had a pretty important reception in the fourth quarter. He had a 24-yard reception on a 3rd and 1,000,000 play that set the Jets up in 4th and manageable on their final drive. And had that drive gone a little bit differently, Isaiah Davis may be looked back on as one of the key players of the game. Jets have a talented backfield. Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, although Braylon Allen's really struggled the last 8 weeks, which maybe has opened the door to Isaiah Davis. But Isaiah Davis showing a little bit of ability. I'd like to see him get involved more frequently as we get closer to the end of the season, because this is a pick I really liked when the Jets made it in the 5th round in this year's draft. I think he's a guy who could potentially be a building block for this team going forward. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Monday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.